The numbers are staggering. 50 days of fighting, more than 2,200 people killed, many of them civilians, including 500 children. At least 11,000 injured, more than 17,000 homes destroyed or badly damaged, around a third of Gaza's 1.8 million people displaced. So when the latest ceasefire agreement between Israel and the Palestinian militants was announced, the main question was simply, what did either side gain from all the damage and bloodshed? Not surprisingly, the answer depends on who you talk to. Later, we'll be joined by representatives from both the Israelis and Palestinians. But we begin with our correspondents in the region. Joining us from Tel Aviv is CCTV's Roy Ruttenberg, and from Gaza, Noor Harazin. Roy, let me start with you. How is this deal being received in Israel?
Well, first of all, immediately we had criticism coming from within Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's own cabinet. Some of his high-ranking security cabinet members, including the economics minister Naftali Bennett and the foreign minister Avigdor Lieberman, quickly criticized the prime minister for what they see as having struck a deal with Hamas, with a militant organization. They, of course, were big proponents of going all the way of completely finishing off Hamas, as they had been pushing along. And in the past, Netanyahu had lashed back at them for trying to use the war as a moment of political opportunism. We know that both have their eye on his seat, so that makes this for a difficult political situation domestically and internally. There has been split support even among the Israeli population, some thinking that the operation was far from complete, fearing that it gives the Palestinian factions a chance to rearm. But there was, of course, relief among some Israelis, particularly those living in the southern communities, that this was the first day on Wednesday where there was pretty much a day without any sirens completely whatsoever, and a lot of residents had simply become used to the sirens at all hours of the day as a barrage of mortars and rockets were fired from Gaza into Israel. This has been a time of public criticism of the prime minister, and we've seen lots of people coming out in support of his actions, but again, the politics here getting involved, playing a role in his decision. He was criticized for not discussing his decision with the members of his cabinet. They say he went alone and then advised them of his decision to take part in that without a deadline.
Let's go to Noor in Gaza. Noor, how are people there reacting to this truce deal?
Well, since the announcement of this truce, the Palestinian people on the ground in Gaza started celebrating this truce. They participated in rallies and protests in the streets of the Gaza Strip, raising the Palestinian flag, and they were really happy for this truce after 50 days of war on the Gaza Strip. They consider it victory just because the fact that Gaza is for now granted some of their basic rights. For example, today, the first day of the truce of the ceasefire, the Kerem Shalom border with Israel was open. Goods was allowed to enter the Gaza Strip through the border. Also, Rafah border with Egypt was open. 8 convoys entered the Gaza Strip. Also, the fishermen in the Gaza Strip were able, for the first time in months, to fish up to 6 nautical miles in the sea. Also, farmers that have farms along the eastern side of the border, they were able to go to the 300 meters of the buffer zone. It was banned for them before to enter this area, but now they are allowed to go to their farms that are located in the buffer zone.
Roy, you mentioned the response from the Israeli public to Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, some groups supporting him, others criticizing him. But he has seen a significant drop in public support, according to opinion polls, hasn't he?
Well, it depends how you read those polls. There was a poll just issued earlier this week before the ceasefire suggesting that satisfaction with his performance in this operation had dropped from mid-July from 82% to as low as 38%. That, of course, looks quite radical, but if you break down some of those voices, some are saying that he was acting too harshly. It appears that the majority were actually saying that he simply wasn't doing enough. So if you actually read those numbers more clearly, they show some of that even internal division. But several politicians and pundits took to the airwaves on Wednesday to say that, of course, while in Gaza this is being seen as a victory for the Palestinian factions and Hamas, indeed, this is actually a victory for Israel, for Netanyahu. They say that he acted calculated and made the right choices, and they say in response to some of those claims being made in Gaza, in fact, the Palestinians gained very little at a great cost. They say that the blockade still exists on Gaza, and that many people here are fearing that this conflict could escalate again in the future if the blockade continues.
Noor, as we've been reporting, many thousands of people in Gaza were left homeless, and of course thousands of buildings were destroyed. People have run short of all supplies in the territory there in Gaza. What can you tell us about recovery efforts right now?
Well, it has been really hurtful to see these people who fled their homes and who are now residing in Shifa Hospital and the UN schools not able to leave their shelters just because their homes along the borders were destroyed. This is a very important issue. The reconstruction of the Gaza Strip needs a year. The Gaza Strip needs years of heavy work to reconstruct all the buildings, the hospitals, the schools that were destroyed during this operation. However, with the entering of the aid convoys, the people here managed to supply themselves with food, medicine, water. The power cut is now down to 16 hours per day, which is good for the people of Gaza, considered to 0 hours per day for the past 3 weeks. But however, the big issue in the Gaza Strip these days is where these families, thousands of families, will reside. Well, where will they live during the next few months, maybe a year?
Thanks, Noor. Reports there from our correspondents Noor Harazin in Gaza and Roy Ruttenberg in Tel Aviv.